Christians ask me, why don't you believe in Paul's conversion story? I'm not saying I don't believe Paul may have encountered Jesus in a vision on the road to Damascus, because Jesus essentially just rebukes Paul for killing his Nazarene followers and strikes him blind. But here's the real problem. In Acts 9, Paul says that he saw a light and heard a voice which knocked him down, but his traveling companions did not see anything. They only heard a voice. Then, when Paul retells his story in chapter 22, he reverses the details and says that his travelers saw the light but did not hear a voice. And then, to make matters worse, in Acts chapter 26, Paul contradicts both of his first two accounts and says that everybody saw the light and everybody heard the voice and everybody fell to the ground. And then Paul tells this elaborate commission to the Gentiles, which Jesus apparently gave him, that he somehow forgot to mention on the first two accounts. Which is interesting, right? Why would Paul only tell the embarrassing details of the story and leave out the most important part of all? That Jesus made Paul his special 13th disciple. These testimonies would utterly fail in a court of law, because no one can be both the claimant and the witness to their own claim. Paul has no witnesses to verify his spectacular claim, and he definitely has some strong motive to lie. Because if you're going to switch sides from the people that you're murdering and then try to join their group, you might just need a miraculous Jesus encounter story to justify such a bold move.
So the claims of this video are actually full of holes. This is not a contradiction, especially when you look at the original language. Scripture was not written originally in English. In fact, according to Paul, when Jesus spoke to him, he was speaking in Hebrew. Are there multiple contradictions within Paul's conversion story? Let's look in the Scripture and see what it actually says. And let's look in the Greek as well to find out even more. Now in Acts chapter 9, starting in verse number 3, it says, "And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven." The light is not Jesus. The light accompanies Jesus. The light is a part of Paul's conversion story, but it is not Jesus himself. And it says, "And he fell to the earth, and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks." You're going against me when you are going against my followers. And then it says, "And he trembling and astonished said, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? And the Lord said unto him, Arise, and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do." And this is the part where there's a supposed discrepancy, so pay close attention. "And then the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man." They didn't see Jesus, but they heard a voice. Let's look into the Greek New Testament to find out what this word actually is in the original language. The Greek word translated voice is the word phone. This is the word that we get phonograph from. Phone, telephone, cell phone. And the interesting thing about the word phone is that it can be translated as either voice or sound. This is the Greek word for sound. It's used multiple other times in the New Testament, translated as either voice or sound depending on the context. There's times where the King James translates it as the voice of a trumpet, meaning the sound, or the sound of a voice, both words being the word phone. This is important. And as a side note, the whole idea of Paul going to the Gentiles isn't something that all of a sudden appears in Acts 26. In Acts chapter 9, right after Paul's conversion, Jesus speaks to a man named Ananias, who is going to aid Paul after he was struck blind. "And the Lord said unto him in verse 15, Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me," speaking about Paul, "to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel." There's multiple occasions after Paul's conversion where Jesus speaks to him or somebody else to relay a message to him, where they speak about him being chosen to go to the Gentiles. This is not a contradiction either. So in Acts chapter 9, it says, "The men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. Flip over to Acts 22, and it says, "They that were with me saw indeed the light, and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spake to me." Here in Acts 22, it says they saw the light. This does not contradict with the fact that they did not see Jesus himself. They saw no man. They saw the light, but they heard not the voice of him that spake to me. They didn't hear what he was saying. Back in Acts chapter 9, it says, "The men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice." This can easily be translated as sound, but seeing no man. Meaning they did not understand the intelligible words that were coming out of Jesus' mouth. They simply heard something, but they saw no man. They didn't know what Jesus was saying to Paul. They heard a sound. Maybe they heard the sound of him speaking, but they could not hear his words. There's no contradiction with the idea of hearing the sound of somebody speaking, but not hearing his voice, not understanding what he is saying. And by the way, also in Acts 22, after Paul gives his testimony, he says that Jesus told him to depart, that he will send thee far thence unto the Gentiles. This is consistent with the rest of the book of Acts and what we read Jesus saying, relaying the message about what Paul must do. When Luke gives the account in Acts chapter 9 of the words that Jesus spoke unto Paul, that's not saying that that is every single thing that Jesus said unto Paul. I think that this creator is looking for an excuse not to believe. In Acts chapter 26, where this creator claims that everybody saw Jesus, everybody heard the voice, let's read it and see what it actually says. In Acts 26, verse 13, he says, "At midday, O king, I saw on the way a light from heaven, above the brightness of the sun, shining round about me and them which journeyed with me." The light shined around everybody. This is not a contradiction to what we read in Acts 22 or in Acts chapter 9. "And when we were all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me in the Hebrew tongue." This is saying that the light shone, that Paul heard the voice, and that everybody fell down. This does not contradict Acts 22, nor does it contradict Acts 9. When it says that the men stood speechless, we just simply need to understand that they got back up. There is no contradiction here in any of these passages. And one of the most amazing things is that Paul was one who consented unto death of multiple followers of Jesus. And after this amazing encounter with Christ, his life was changed, to the point where he eventually is martyred for his faith. According to history, Paul was beheaded in Rome. It's good for us to want to understand the truth of Scripture. It's good for us to search out what the Scripture says and why. But we should not be looking for an excuse not to believe.